Hello. Welcome back to hell. Oh, so the Miami Dolphins yesterday lost to the New England Patriots 33-27 at home. Tua had been 8-0 previous to this game against the Patriots, and I do not believe the Patriots had beaten us in Florida in a very, very long time. Highlights of the game include being down 12-0 after the first quarter, being unable to get a stop on a defensive drive for the Dolphins until the second half, and about 12 consecutive drives, which sets like a new record in about 25 years. Surrendering a 90-yard kickoff return touchdown after having just scored a punt return touchdown, and having not one but two separate chances to win the game on a last minute drive, and turning over the ball on both drives. First with a horrific Tua interception, and then taking a sack on fourth down. Real Cinema says, tonight on Days of Our Dolphins. So yeah, the Dolphins couldn't even beat the Patriots in South Florida, when half of the Patriots players are always cramping and whatnot because of the extreme heat. A team the Dolphins have historically dominated in the McDaniel and Tua era. And especially at home, and we couldn't even beat them. And now we have to play at Buffalo on Thursday night. A team that checks notes utterly destroyed the New York Jets 30-10. So the Jets fan optimism for potentially being able to beat the Jets after the game they had this against the Steelers was pretty laughable. If you do not count the kickoff return touchdown, the Miami Dolphins defense had already surrendered 33 points against the Colts, and now surrendered another 26 essentially against the Patriots. So that would mean, let me do my math real quick. The Dolphins opponents are averaging almost 30 points a game. Remind me why Greer didn't think it was necessary to go get a good free agent corner. Real Cinema says Mike might be fired or resigned at halftime of the Bills game if it gets out of hand. Yeah. It's looking more and more likely that McDaniel is going to be out by at least no later than October. And It's so bad right now that I think there's more than a few Dolphins fans who are hoping the Dolphins keep losing so that McDaniel and Greer get fired. And if McDaniel gets fired but Greer doesn't, I want to find out just what kind of blackmail or voodoo magic that Chris Greer is using to keep his job, because Greer has been responsible for one of the worst track records in the league in the simplest of things, like maintaining a good offensive line or choosing the right talents to sign to the contracts. Like, one of his biggest success stories was arguably getting Tyreek Hill, and now Tyreek Hill is actively jumping up and down like an angry cartoon character after Tua sails a ball 10 yards past him. I wouldn't exactly blame Tyreek at this point for wanting out of a Dolphins team that is clearly decided to hit rock bottom. Unfortunately, going into the season, I knew it was a crossroads for the Dolphins where either everything would go right and the Dolphins might actually become a contender, or everything would go wrong. Everything would go wrong. It would become an unmitigated disaster, and the Dolphins organization would essentially be nuked and have to start from ground zero again. Real Cinema says he was doing the sign for uncatchable pass when Tua overthrew him. He's so done. Yeah. It's frustrating. Like, Tua actually threw what was it, a 56-yard pass to Tyreek. Tua showed flashes of the quarterback that we were promised back in 2019 when the team was blatantly tanking. And then all of the efforts to get the Dolphins back up from a 12-0 deficit early on, being down by 1 at halftime, having the lead multiple times, and it really wasn't so much the Patriots beating us as it was the Dolphins beating themselves, especially in the later game. The special teams folding like a wet graham cracker and surrendering a 90-yard kickoff return touchdown immediately after the amazing punt return touchdown by Malik Washington. And then those final 2 offensive drives were the real look at what the Dolphins this Dolphins team becomes in clutch situations. A mess. Ghost Slayer says, "Hey Kyle, hope you and your dad are having a good day." Well, my dad got to stream via one of the rookie games for the Florida Panthers, so he's probably happy. Real Cinema says the Patriots defensive coordinator was out for health reasons. We only put up 20 points on offense against the first-time defensive play caller. And yeah, our defense sucks, but we already knew that. The Dolphins had next to no defense throughout the entire game. You know, it looks like right now all the Dolphins have on defense is Bradley Chubb, Rasul Douglas, and maybe guys like Chop Robinson and Mika Fitzpatrick. No one else is doing anything. Jalen Phillips, my dad noticed he looked awfully slow, and it appears that he probably is not the same player that he was before the devastating injuries. And Matthew Judon's highlight was failing to chase down Drake May and letting him score a touchdown. For all our supposed strength of the defensive line, we had immense trouble stopping the run yet again. We generated like 3 sacks, and that was the extent of the Dolphins' playmaking ability on defense. The Dolphins' defense has yet to generate a single takeaway in any shape or fashion against Daniel Jones and the Colts and Drake May and the Patriots. And the Dolphins have to go play Buffalo on Thursday night. My best case scenario for the Dolphins this season had us going off to a 2-0 start thanks to playing against the Colts and Patriots and then having reality handed to us in Buffalo. But it's so much worse. The Dolphins are 0-2, dead last in the division, and now have to go play the Bills on the road on Thursday night football. It's probably not going to be a game so much as it's going to be a public execution of this version of the Dolphins. Barring some unforeseen, ridiculous, insane win against the Bills, which if the Bills found a way to lose to this Dolphins team, they should be absolutely ashamed of themselves. Like, I know it's not going to happen. It would be so freaking hilarious, though, if the Bills had the amazing comeback against the Ravens and crushed the Jets just to find a way to lose to this Dolphins team on Thursday night at home. Yeah, too bad Josh Allen will probably have passed and thrown for like 4 combined touchdowns by the end of the first half. With that defense we're throwing out there, we're cooked. And the offense won't stop shooting itself in the foot in critical situations. Tua almost he did throw a terrible, god-awful interception on the first drive of the game and was bailed out by offsetting penalties. So it just begs the question of what on earth does the Dolphins locker room look like right now? You already have J.J. Watt telling the Dolphins players that they should pack their bags for the January vacation since they held a players-only meeting before the second week of the season. I didn't know that apparently holding a players-only meeting after week 1 was a sign of dire circumstances. It makes me believe that the Dolphins locker room might potentially become divided over the guys who still supports Tua and McDaniel and the ones like Tyreek who probably want out. It is looking more and more likely with each passing week that McDaniel and Greer are going to be gone and that the Dolphins are probably getting blown up at the trade deadline. It just is highly disappointing. I tried to keep my expectations modest for the Dolphins after seeing how they were in previous years. I thought for sure that the Dolphins would be essentially the gunslinging team of the AFC East, forced to use constant bailouts by Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle on splash plays because our defense can't stop a tumbleweed. But it's even worse than that. We've surrendered almost 60 combined points to Daniel Jones and Drake May, who, okay, the Colts have offensive talent, at least. They have Jonathan Taylor, they have Tyler Warren, guys like Pierce and Downs. The Patriots have Kayshon Boutte and a bunch of rookies. The Patriots are still supposed to be in the middle of their rebuild, for crying out loud. But of course, Mike Vrabel finds a way to beat us every single time. Of all the coaches in the league, it's Vrabel who seems to always have McDaniel's number more than any other. Real Cinema says JJ McCarthy has an ankle injury out next week versus the Bengals. Get ready for Jake Browning versus Carson Wentz. Yeah, let's talk about some of these injuries. Justin Fields suffered a concussion. JJ McCarthy has an ankle injury. Joe Burrow broke his toe and has to have surgery. It is going to be out for 3 months. So there goes all the Bengals' hopes and dreams again. And apparently Jaden Daniels has a knee injury and his status is in doubt for the game against the Raiders on Sunday. The MRI he got revealed no major, which is fortunate because I don't think the Commanders fans could stand to hear much more bad news after Austin Eckler tore his Achilles. And of course, the Bears get even more bad news because Pro Bowl quarterback Jalen Johnson is out indefinitely with a groin injury. So that defense is going to get even more cooked. Dolphins fan 1979 says McDummy has got to go. He says, I was 21 the last time the Dolphins won a playoff game. I was a literal infant the last time the Dolphins won a playoff game. I think my dad was holding me in his arms, rocking me to sleep while that game was going on. It's funny, yesterday there was a plane flying around Hard Rock Stadium saying fire Greer and fire McDaniel, and the Dolphins did in that game is going to convince them to do that. Not do that, I mean. Like, you could argue that losing losing to the Patriots at home in the middle of the South Floridian summer when the Patriots players are charbroiling on the sunlight exposed side of the field. It's so much worse. It's so much worse because it means that none of the potential excuses that could be made for week one's loss, like Lou Anarumo's defense catching the Dolphins' offense off guard, or the Colts being pumped up because of the memorial service for Jim Irsay, or any of those things. The Dolphins looked just as terrible in that first quarter as they had in a whole game in week one. And while the Dolphins offense finally woke up in the remainder of the game yesterday, the defense is still as terrible as ever. Utterly incapable. Our defense is literally incapable of preventing huge plays whenever we have to try and use the extra attacker on the blitz. Literally every time you try and get the extra pass rush in, the opposing quarterback is going to find one of his receivers wide open because we decided that the likes of Jack Jones and the rookie Jason Marshall Jr. were best options at corner. And, there's only so much that Bradley Chubb and Minka Fitzpatrick can do. Real Cinema says, here's some head coach options: Mike McCarthy, Doug Peterson, John Gruden, Joe Brady. Yeah, none of those are really sounding like great options. I mean, it's pretty clear at this point that McDaniel is most likely getting fired. What I care about more is that both McDaniel and Greer get fired at the same time. If they're going to do this, if they're going to fire the coach, they need to fire the GM. But Stephen Ross already made this mistake when he fired Flores, but did not fire Greer. You could have argued that Flores was doing a good job. He was able to take a team that had started with a horrible record and turn them around. We fired him after he had strung together 7 straight wins in the season after we had 7 straight losses. Like, it's just it's unfortunate that it's come to this. The Dolphins already had, less than a decade ago, a terrible, horrible season in 2019 where the team was absolutely garbage. And at the time, it was the tank for Tua. And guess what? We got Tua, and he started off with promise. But I think at some point, we might have to acknowledge that all of the concussions that Tua has suffered has probably had a non-zero effect on his decision-making ability, his ability to have on-field awareness, his ability to correctly gauge reads and to not panic if his first read isn't available. Like, this is nowhere near all on Tua, what happened yesterday. Our defense was terrible for the most part, but just take a look at those final two drives. That god-awful interception he threw, and then taking a sack to end the game. Oh yeah, want to hear something funny? The Cardinals were trying to hold off a comeback by the Carolina Panthers, and you know who saved the day for the Arizona Cardinals against the Panthers? A game-winning sack by Calais Campbell. The 39-year-old saved the game for the Cardinals, and the Cardinals are now the recipients of one of the ugliest 2-0 records you will ever see. Two of the ugliest wins imaginable for the Cardinals against the Saints and the Panthers. I'm noticing a trend of former Dolphins defenders single-handedly winning games for their respective teams in the same week as the Dolphins are being handed yet another L. First, it was Jalen Ramsey last week with his tackle to force an incompletion to help the Steelers get the win against the Jets. And now it's Calais Campbell. Dolphins fan says Tua's a bum, bro. Well, I mean, he's not doing himself any favors with those horrendous gaffes. So it's just funny because the Dolphins had 358 total yards. They actually did better than the Patriots in that respect. The Patriots had 2 more first downs, and they also possessed the ball for 7 more minutes. The Dolphins had multiple chances. The Dolphins had multiple chances to win this game. The Dolphins had multiple chances to win this game. How about you don't surrender the 90-yard kickoff return after having scored the punt return touchdown? How about you don't throw an interception on that drive? How about you don't take a sack on 4th down the very next drive? The Dolphins had multiple chances to win this game against the Patriots, and they just blew it constantly. And now comes the part where the team probably gets even worse because the Dolphins just tossed away their chance at a win before we have to go play the Bills on Thursday. And, you know, the Bills offense has only put up 71 points in 2 games. they torched what was supposed to be a good defense in the Ravens. And then they humiliated the Jets, especially the Jets fans who had some bit of optimism after the loss to the Steelers. But I guess I should talk about some of these other games around the league. The Rams beat the Titans. The Rams beat the Titans 33-19. At one point, they were actually losing to the Titans. No joke, it was a 3-point lead in the third quarter for the Titans, but then the Rams apparently scored 20 straight points and won 33-19. Cincinnati won a wild game against the Jaguars 31-27 after Joe Burrow went down with injury and Jake Browning stepped in doing his best Jameis Winston impression with 21 completions on 32 attempts, 2 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. That was pretty hilarious. And then, of course, Baltimore destroyed Cleveland 41-17. Buffalo beats the Jets 30-10. Mac Jones was able to do enough to lead the 49ers to a 26-21 victory against the Saints. He went 26 for 39, 279 passing yards, and 3 touchdowns. And then Detroit railroaded Chicago to the tune of 52-21. This was personal for Dan Campbell going up against his former offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson. And I was the happy recipient of 39 fantasy points from Amon-Ra St. Brown. That's going to almost single-handedly win me my fantasy game this week. Thanks, Amon-Ra. And then, of course, the Cowboys and Giants had one of the most insane games you'll ever see, with Dallas escaping with a victory in overtime, 40-37. Then you have the Seahawks showing the Steelers who's boss, 31-17. And the Colts having one of the most hilarious ways to achieve a comeback victory. The Bills fans can finally rest. Karma has come back for the Broncos. Remember when the Bills lost for taking that too many men penalty on a missed field goal attempt by the Broncos, and then the Broncos made the second kick attempt and won? Well, guess what happens to give Indiana Jones his second win as a Colt? You guessed it, a 60-yard field goal missed by Spencer Schrader, leverage penalty called on the Broncos, and then Schrader making the 45-yard field goal to win 29-28. Cardinals hung on to one 27-22 against the Panthers. The Eagles won the Super Bowl rematch against the Chiefs in an ugly defensive game, 20-17. And the Falcons humiliated the Vikings 22-6 last night. So much for JJ McCarthy being him, like like some of the Vikings fans were proclaiming after winning against the Bears. SoFlo predicts that Chris Greer will get promoted to president of football operations, like how the Panthers fired Dale Talon by promoting him. There's another GoFundMe for a plane with the Fire Greer McDaniel banner for a game against the Jets on Monday Night Football. Yeah. At this rate, I doubt we can even beat the Jets. I mean, you saw what the Jets did to the Steelers defense, right? Our defense is arguably worse. Knights Ninja says that's only because of the natty he won. Are you talking about JJ McCarthy? It was not a pretty night for the dude. Yeah, he won the national championship with IMG Academy, and now he has an ankle injury and could be out multiple weeks. So Vikings Bengals went from JJ McCarthy and Joe Burrow to Jake Browning versus Carson Wentz, which is probably going to result in some of the most hilarious error-riddled football you'll ever see. I mean, Jake Browning was already putting on a fine Jameis Winston impression against the Jaguars. Yeah, the Chiefs are 0-2 as well. And at the bottom of the AFC West, it's so beautiful. Enjoy it while it lasts. But I kid you not, the Chargers and Raiders are going to be fighting tonight for sole possession of first place in the AFC West. That's how backwards the AFC West has become. So yeah, the Bills, Bengals, Colts, Eagles, Packers, 49ers, Cardinals, and Rams. Have you seen NFC West? The only team to lose a game in the NFC West has been the Seahawks, and they're 1-1. The 49ers, Cardinals, and Rams have all won their games. Either, unless the Buccaneers lose to the Texans, they'll also be 2-0 and on top of their division. The Packers are looking like early favorites to win the NFC North. The Eagles have a 2-0 record. And yeah, the Chargers and Raiders, one of them will be 2-0 and in control of the AFC West. I'm going to pick Chargers here. I don't think Geno Smith will be able to outduel Justin Herbert. And Justin Herbert actually has weapons now with guys like Keenan Allen returning, Quentin Johnston might be breaking out. O'Marion Hampton gives them something in terms of a run game. I think the massive shock, though, is the Indianapolis Colts of all teams being 2-0 and winning the AFC South. You know, the Colts looked really good against the Dolphins defense, but the bigger surprise has been clearly the Colts turning right around and wrecking what was supposed to be an elite Broncos defense. And the Bengals, they better enjoy leading the AFC North while it lasts, because I doubt Jake Browning can keep them on top. And, no surprise, the Bills are winning the AFC East at the moment. Dolphins fan says Joe Robbie was our best owner. Well, I mean, a lot of the best days of the Dolphins did happen with him as owner. What would you do if the Dolphins won against the Bills? Wonder who was. I wonder who told the Bills to throw the game. That's probably what I would do. Cliff says Stephen Ross, worst owner in sports. It's if you're going by worst all time, absolutely not. There have been legions of owners that would have you begging for Ross. In terms of active owners in the NFL only, it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard to label Stephen Ross as the worst when, Jerry Jones is still running things. I mean, you could argue that Jerry Jones is really not the worst owner, but he's the worst GM. Where do you draw the line there? Like, if you have Jerry Jones in his twilight as your acting GM, a dude who would rather trade Micah Parsons to the Green Bay Packers than simply pay the man what he definitely earned. Yeah, it's hard to pick Stephen Ross as the worst owner. Real Sinner says, "Wake up from my dream." I don't know how many Dolphins fans want us to beat the Bills. If we found a way to beat the Bills on Thursday, that means Greer and McDaniel are going to keep their job for at least another month, right? I bet there are Dolphins fans actively rooting for the Dolphins to continue losing. We have no idea what the state of the locker room is right now. It's very clear that Tyreek is frustrated with the quarterback he's stuck with, sailing passes well over his head, and at least once right into the arms of a defender. And it's looking more and more likely that Tyreek Hill will get traded to a contender. Let's just say that it's the Chiefs, who really could use a high-end wide receiver right now. I expect it's going to be a bit more time before any of this actually happens. Like, I had heard buzz that Stephen Ross was going to wait like 6 to 7 weeks until he made his decision on whether to fire Greer and McDaniel or not. So apparently tonight's Chargers Raiders game is going to be quotes the for another chapter in the long-standing rivalry between Jim Harbaugh and Pete Carroll. I think I'll probably be watching that game tonight because I do have a fantasy player. I do have a Keenan Allen in that game. And my opponent has O'Marion Hampton. But oh, would you look at that? ESPN finally updated and credited my Seahawks defense for the touchdown they scored. That was one of the most hilarious things I'd seen, was how the Steelers surrendered a muffed punt fumble recovery for a touchdown by the Seahawks. So, Colin, if you're here, good luck. You've got O'Marion Hampton and Kaimi Fairbairn, and I've got Keenan Allen, and I'm up by 45 points in the fantasy game. So it would require some Ravens Bills levels of insanity for you to beat me at this point. A Real Cinema asks, are you streaming either game tonight? No. Probably not. My dad and I had a very long weekend. We ran a yard sale on Friday and Saturday, and on Tuesday we're going to have to make preparations to take some of the junk we didn't sell to the dump. So it's not likely that we're streaming either game tonight. GP20 says like the Thomas jersey. Thank you. Yeah. It fits me pretty nicely. This is my dad's Zach Thomas jersey. It's the only jersey of his that he has the only Dolphins jersey he has that fits me. So yeah, barring some insane, ridiculous comeback by Colin, I am going to have a better record in my fantasy league than the Dolphins do in this NFL season. I could have been 2-0 had I made the right lineup decisions in week 1, but I wasn't counting on guys like Keenan Allen to have a better time than Devonta Smith. And I drafted Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith hoping that I could have weekly good results from Jalen Hurts and Devonta Smith, and so far the only thing going for me there is Jalen Hurts' ground game. Like, what happened to the Eagles' passing game? Like, Jalen's trying to bring back he's the running back narratives. But I mean, I guess it could be worse though. Like my dad drafted Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. Last week, they helped him come back from a massive deficit to win. This week, Lamar got him 26 points, but Derrick Henry only got him 2.3 points. How does Derrick Henry of all running backs only get 23 yards on 11 carries? Let's see, new offensive coordinator since Kellen Moore left. Yeah, you're talking about the Eagles. Like, it can't be that hard though to create a consistent passing game when you have guys like AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. I also pleasantly discovered Rome Odunze appears to be the new number one receiver in Chicago. And while I wish I hadn't left his 31 points on my bench, it should not cost me victory this week. And I definitely will be having Rome Odunze on my fantasy lineup when he goes up against that Cowboys defense. It's going to be beautiful. And I also have DeAndre Swift as my back. My DeAndre Swift is my second running back. And my backup quarterback is actually Caleb Williams. I don't know if I would be so bold as to start him instead of Jalen Hurts. But Jalen needs to do more than just run the tush push every game. I need more from Jalen Hurts. So yeah. So is the Bills-Ravens game, in your opinion, still the game of the year? Or for those of you who watched Cowboys-Giants, did that take its place as game of the year? Because if there's anything that could possibly have beaten that insane game between the Bills and Ravens, it might be a game that goes to overtime with a 37-37 score. So yeah, JJ McCarthy is out 2 to 4 weeks. And the Jets are going to prepare a plan for Tyrod Taylor in case Justin Fields is out against the Buccaneers. So we could potentially we already know we're getting a Jake Browning versus Carson Wentz matchup. And now it seems like Tyrod Taylor might be having a chance against the Buccaneers. Let's see. I wonder what the power rankings look like after this week. On last week's power rankings, ESPN had the Dolphins at 26, and the only teams worse were the Patriots, Browns, Panthers, Giants, and Saints. I'm thinking that the Dolphins might fall a few more spots, especially since we just lost to the Patriots. We lost to the Patriots at home in the middle of South Florida summer. We were up against Drake May, Kayshon Boutte, and a bunch of rookies, and we couldn't even beat them. This is going to be a long season, isn't it? Right now, at least half or more of the Dolphins fan base is just on Fire, Greer, and McDaniel watch, and probably wondering what the Dolphins get in return for trading away Tyreek Hill, who, might I remind you, is currently in the midst of yet more domestic violence allegations by his ex-wife. So, there probably would be at least one or more teams interested in taking on Tyreek, but that would trading away Tyreek would signal the end of essentially this Dolphins era. I don't think we can get rid of Tua that quickly. We did sort of throw $55 million a year at him. Yeah, we're definitely not streaming one of these games tonight. That the early Monday night game is Buccaneers and Texans, and that has ugly defensive struggle written all over it. And then the Chargers and Raiders game doesn't even start till 10 o'clock Eastern time. What maniac was in charge of creating a Monday night doubleheader? And I guess they have the Chargers and Raiders game starting so late because over where the game is being held. Where are they having this game? Oh, they're having it in Las Vegas. So yeah, 10 o'clock here is going to be 7 o'clock there. Yeah, at 10 p.m. Eastern time. Yeah, so yeah, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. Our defense was the most inept in stopping another team from scoring in 25 years. I believe it was 12 straight drives where the Dolphins surrendered points on defense. 12. It took until the second half of week 2 for the Dolphins to get a stop on defense. And a lot of the time with the Dolphins having any sort of defensive luck, it was because the Patriots wouldn't stop taking penalties. So Remind me what the schedule is. I know it's not going to be pretty. So we have to play at Buffalo on Thursday nights. Bills are probably going to trample the Dolphins in an utter stampede. Then we have the Monday night home game against the Jets. So at least we got the extra long break after that pummeling by the Bills. And that's plenty of time for McDaniel and Greer to get fired in between weeks, right? So we have to play against the Jets. You know, problem is the Dolphins defense makes every quarterback that plays against them look elite. So we have to play Jets, Panthers, Chargers, Browns, and Falcons. You know, in any other season, I would have figured 3-1 or excuse me, 3-2 from that stretch. I don't want to know what the Dolphins are going to look like. That brutal mid-season stretch where we have to play Thursday night against the Ravens, then play against the Bills again, then have to travel to Madrid to play the Commanders. That has to be the stretch of the year, I think, where McDaniel and Greer would get fired. Week 6 to 7. So Stephen Ross apparently had mentioned 6 to 7 weeks to find out if McDaniel and Greer will be fired or not. That would mean either after the Chargers game or the Browns game. And you know, that Chargers game might be a particularly brutal blowout. Real Cinema says next 3 games are Bills, then Jets, then Panthers. First win might not be until the Panthers. Yeah. Mr. Vid says, good afternoon, Kyle. That game was nerve-wracking. Mr. Vid says, Jets suck. The Jets might beat us. Like, this is a team that put up 32 points against that so vaunted Steelers defense. The Panthers definitely looking like one of the worst teams in the league right now. They're 0-2. They almost back against the Cardinals. Oh, great. Camera disconnected. The Panthers almost came back against the Cardinals, but then the Cardinals escaped with yet another ugly win. All right. Okay. I remember last season when all hope was equally as lost after we were steamrolled by the Bills in week 2 and lost to a concussion. Unfortunately for McDaniel and Greer, Tua is perfectly healthy right now. So they cannot blame the train wreck that this season is shaping up to be on Tua injury. At least not yet. Let's look at some early 2025 team stats. Through 2 weeks, so the Dolphins. Give me a second. Yeah. The Dolphins are already next to last in the entire NFL in terms of points surrendered per game. The only team worse is the Bears, and a lot of that was inflated. That was inflated by the Lions dropping 52 on them. This defense was supposed to at least have a competent defensive line. But yeah, with every week that passes, all of the doubt and pessimism from certain Dolphins fans is only being justified. Relic says Bill's literally gonna give you guys belt to ass. Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if the Bills dropped a 50 burger. A 50 burger on the Dolphins. This Dolphins team surrendered 33 points apiece to Daniel Jones and Drake May. Josh Allen's probably going to aim for twice that. Josh Allen's going to see if he can get a 60 plus points game just to prove a point. Real Cinema says 50 or more, they could break a points record. So it's interesting. The airplane yesterday only said fire Greer and McDaniel. There was no sell the team Ross banner being flown. I mean, do any Dolphins fans have any sort of confidence in Stephen Ross to actually put together a contending team, a true contending team, while he's owner of the Dolphins? Like, clearly, Greer and McDaniel's time in the Dolphins organization is running very short, but how much trust can actually be put in Stephen Ross to pick the right replacements in that scenario? Like, who is even out there? Who's even out there available for Greer and Ross replacements? And unfortunately, we can't just ask Bill Zito and Paul Maurice to pull double duty. They're busy trying to give the Florida Panthers a three-peat. Do you realize just how ridiculous things have turned, where the Florida Panthers, a team that used to be the absolute joke of the NHL, a team that shuffled through coaches and players and relocation rumors like a deck of cards. That team, the Florida Panthers, built themselves up after some god-awful years in the 2000s and early 2010s. We have witnessed the Florida Panthers under Vinny Viola's ownership, Bill Zito's management, and then Paul Maurice's coaching turn from a joke and a consistent bridesmaid to all the true contenders in the Atlantic Division, let alone the rest of the league, we saw that team turn into a back-to-back Stanley Cup champion with seriously good odds of winning the third cup in a row. The greatest struggle Panthers fans have right now is the fact that Tkachuk is going to be out for a while, and the NHL is instituting those new playoff salary cap rules early, so we cannot use the same thing we did last year to get more talent, at least not to the extent of getting another Brad Marchand. Real Cinema says, for GM, you find someone from a competent organization like the Bills, Chiefs, Eagles, Ravens, Packers. I would hold off on picking the Ravens. It is incredibly damning that John Harbaugh has yet to face any consequences for all of the massive leads his team has blown in the fourth quarter of games. The Ravens are one of the most hilarious cases of immense talent and ability being utterly wasted. The Bills can at least point to one consistent boogeyman, and that being the Kansas City Chiefs. The Ravens have let just about every team you can imagine have their way with them in the fourth quarter of a game. The Dolphins came back from a 21-point deficit in the fourth quarter against the Ravens a few years ago. The Browns humiliated them in this fashion. The Raiders, I believe, wasn't AOC the quarterback in that game for the Raiders? Or was it Gardner Minshew? The Ravens just seem to have a fetish for blowing double-digit leads in the fourth quarter. They didn't even wait until January this time to implode against the Bills. It's why I cannot take the Ravens seriously as the team to potentially dethrone the Chiefs from AFC Championship status. And make no mistake, I would have to assume that the Kansas City Chiefs 0-2 record is merely a fluke, and that once guys like Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy come back, that the Chiefs will most likely be getting back to Super Bowl contending status. By all means, I hope the Chiefs lose as many games as possible, because that is arguably the only thing worse than having the Bills go to the Super Bowl in this time frame from an AFC perspective is having the freaking Chiefs do it again. GP20 says John Harbaugh's season's untouchable, like how Tomlin gets from Pittsburgh. Well, Mike Tomlin is an entirely different case study in of himself. He seems to be rewarded solely on his ability to get the Steelers to a above 500 record every year, regardless of how many games the Steelers have to be bailed out of with unbelievable BS and splash plays. They were one Chris Boswell 60-yarder away from losing to the Jets in week 1, and they got destroyed by the Seahawks yesterday. Real Cinema says, I'd rather see the Chiefs in the Super Bowl than the Bills. I never root for rivals unless it directly benefits us in playoff standings, which won't be happening this year. Yeah. Well, more than anything, I just want it to be different. I'm sick and tired of seeing Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Taylor Swift blasted on my television screens every year when it comes to AFC Championship and Super Bowl. The earliest the Chiefs' season has ended since 2019, was overtime in the AFC Championship game. Real Cinema says, keep hoping for Ravens Lions since we aren't doing anything but they both choke. Yeah, Ravens Lions would be awesome, especially the Lions part. I would love to see the Lions have things break their way, but right now they have to worry about the Packers. Ugh. I bet every NFC North opponent of the Packers is just thrilled that Jerry Jones practically gave away Micah Parsons to the Packers. And the Packers after winning week 1, let's see. Give me a second. The Packers won week 1 against the Lions and then turned right around and had pretty much the exact same level of dominance against the Commanders. And the Packers' upcoming schedule have the Browns, the Cowboys, the Jake Browning-led Bengals, the Cardinals, the Steelers, the Panthers. They might not lose a game until November 10th when they have to play the Eagles. Like, who is going to give them the hardest time? Like, Cowboys? Like, Micah Parsons is probably just licking his sack his former teammate in Dak Prescott, just to have one up on Jerry Jones. Yeah, that schedule for this is arguably one of the best schedules I've seen in across the NFL. Browns, Cowboys, Bengals, who again, they're going to be starting Jake Browning, not Joe Burrow. I mean, Jake Browning's, if he does his Jameis Winston impression again, it's possible he might give Green Bay fits, but he also might hand the football to them on the regular. Cardinals, Steelers, Panthers, Eagles, Giants, Vikings, Lions, Bears, Broncos, Bears, Ravens, and Vikings. You're looking at a potential 14-3 team here. 14-3 or 12-5. 12-5 maybe. I'd say the Packers with how their defense has been playing and the Jordan Love in the offense able to provide the serviceable performances. The Packers might be the team to beat in the NFC this year. Who's going to stop them? Like, if the Lions can get back on track, which they appeared to do so against the Bears yesterday, but they were playing against the Bears. Packers just beats the Commanders pretty resoundingly. The Eagles are definitely going to remain a threat in the NFC this year, but the Eagles have no receiving game to speak of. They've just been relying on Saquon running over everyone and tush pushes. Like, I'm sure that the new offensive coordinator in Philly is going to get those kinks ironed out pretty quickly. Just like I'm sure that Dan Campbell knew the Lions might get off to a rough start in week 1, having to deal with no Ben Johnson or Aaron Glenn. But he got his revenge and then some against Ben Johnson in week 2. My God, 52-21. But that's what you expect from the Lions. They'll keep on running up that score on you, especially if you piss them off. Cade says, hey, you guys doing Buccaneers versus Texans tonight? No, probably not. My dad and I we were running a yard sale on Friday and Saturday and have to prepare to clean up some of the mess left behind starting tomorrow. So my dad and I are most likely not going to be streaming Buccaneers Texans. That game honestly has a ugly defensive struggle written all over it. Texans still have good defense and might be able to pressure Baker Mayfield. And, it's not like CJ Stroud actually has an offensive line. Also, there is the fact that we have to stream the live execution of the Dolphins on Thursday night. So we will be there for that. I'm pretty sure they got sentenced to death by Buffalo Stampede for the crimes of surrendering 33 points each to the Patriots and Colts and making Drake May and Daniel Jones look like potential upper tier quarterbacks. Daniel Jones might be this year's Sam Darnold if he can keep doing what he did in weeks 1 and 2. Like, the Broncos were stunned in that loss to the Colts. That defense is supposed to be good, and it surrenders 29 points, including a brutal leverage penalty on what would have been a missed field goal by the Colts. And then the Colts made the second attempt and won the game. Let's see, who do the Broncos play next? Oh, they have the Chargers. Good luck to them. And apparently Pat Surtain is now dealing with tweaking his left ankle. Just lovely for the Broncos. Who do the Colts play next? The Colts get to play the Titans, and then the Rams, and then they get to play the Raiders and Cardinals. And lucky Colts, they get to play Titans twice. Okay, so I guess the summary of this old mess is that it turns out that Greer should have been fired a long time ago, because after all of these seasons of agony and frustration, we still do not have a very good offensive line. I mean, our entire blind side got injured for multiple weeks after one game. We now have no corners and next to no defense aside from the occasional sack by Bradley Chubb or Rasul Douglas trying to fix all the problems on the secondary by himself. What has Minka Fitzpatrick done for us lately? And don't get me started on what Matthew Judon's glorious contributions have been. Oh, this is going to be a long season, and I would be shocked if the Dolphins are within 2 scores of the Bills by the time the clock hits 0 in the fourth quarter on Thursday night. Positively shocked, I tell you. Buckle up. This is looking like an unmitigated disaster. Like, it depends on how the Browns and Panthers of the league are feeling on their particular matchups against us. This could be a 1-16 team. This could be a 1-16 team. It's looking that atrocious. All right. I'm going to go ahead and sign off and enjoy the rest of my Monday. I don't want to have to think about the Dolphins until Thursday. I at least earned that much. having to watch what happened yesterday, how cruel it is to give false hope that the Dolphins would actually beat the Patriots, one of the gimmies of the schedule. Urgh. So, yeah, everyone enjoy the rest of your Monday. Take care, and Jaws and I will see you on Monday. I mean, Thursday. Thursday night football for a Dolphins Dolphins fish fry. Take care, everyone.